Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Mars Hour. Mars is in the 8th house with Anabalgadi, and we have Saturn Neptune. Now, I've predicted that the secret estates, or the human trafficking estates, or the real estate scams might be looted. Now, eventually, I believe that this leads to the only way to manage estates is when each person owns their own property and is not subjected to taxation for the property for residents. I mean, one could say it as, oh, it's a basic human right, but also is the only solution to having, to tending to the looting and flipping of estates. Because when we loot the trafficking estate, each and every person that was rescued needs to have their own individual self-owned house. A person cannot we can only have trade in real estate when there are zero homeless people. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, it's a birthright, it's a this, it's a that. I mean, if I'm being pragmatic, let's say, I don't know, I'm living in as a tenant, um, or living, or even traveling and having, I don't know, nice places to stay and so on. As long as, as long as there is no actual issue with having a place to stay that is safe and free, like, what do I care how, right? As long as I'm safe and free and have my sense of self, not no without any crime, without any, then there are many possibilities. But the thing is that I think it's going to fixate that because that has not been going well. And people really believe that they can have real estate trade, whether as owners of estates and even as tenants, um, when there are homeless people. And here's the thing: why do homeless people do not want shelter or, let's say, housing? Because they are afraid of what happened to them in the house. And the only way is, now, any solution must honor each and every individual's sovereignty. Because let's just say in a normal situation when I'm safe and free everywhere in the world and so on and so forth, and according to me, not according to others, then there's no problem. I don't think about real estate. I don't think about a housing sector. But what happens when there is a problem? A problem requires solution. And a solution has to honor my sovereignty. I think um, a lot of people are running into the fact that if people try to figure out who is, let's say, um, sex trafficked, because there's no such thing as sex work, and who is not, they're gonna run into a dead end, because they're gonna run into their death literally, um, because it's rape. and and it's sovereignty o'clock, and rape affect abundance, and rape affect ability to work, um, in housing, and so on and so forth. So, for example, my teacher of aromatherapy for the second course, Shanisa Rudy, one of the things that she was concerned is that they are going to take her profession as well. What does it mean? That the people that make, let's say, body butters or essential oils or reflexology, she was doing also reflexology, that the sex traffickers are basically going to take her profession and okay, so it's not to just replace a vocation is not helping. So let's say, I don't know, I studied aromatherapy, and people thought that a person that is doing, I don't know, essential oil blends or perfumes is probably working in another thing. It was kind of like, no, Vulcan. And then they run into the people that, and here's the thing, they trafficked some people by torture, and then they put them in masquerade jobs. Now, the people that we see, I don't know, in the street and so on, all of them are trafficked. None of them is sex worker. And it's in conjoining with the welfare and with the hospitals. So, first estates to besiege and release people is hospitals and emergency centers. Now, the minute people are convinced that sex work is work, what happens? Right? It's rape. Vulcan, it's rape. It's rape. The people that are convinced by that are probably people that were never taught, to honor sexual boundaries. They could be married people. Now, it exposes the fact that a lot of married people are Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's. Now, and here's the thing. People tend to that when it... And if it's something that, bothers a person, then naturally their inclination will be to do something about that. Nobody has, how should I say that? Starting from the big corporation, the hospitals, the emergency centers, um, and the centers where they are supposedly providing public housing. Okay, which means the offices where real estate offices, those places probably can be legally looted. Targeting individual centers, so all the technology centers. If they did not stop targeting individuals, they're basically committing crime against humanity. Police stations that do not prevent crime. Because for organized crime, okay, I live in Israel. When they had the big invasion, several cities, they looted the police stations. This is how when they besiege a city, they loot the police stations. Now here's the thing. If those that looted actually have zero rape, zero slavery, zero trafficking, which means there's no such thing as sex work. Here, the lady that I just spoke with, she doesn't have a house. She's homeless. At first, I thought that they're trafficking her to work for housing, but no, she doesn't even have a house. And she has to take the drugs to be able to cope with basically the rape that she's going through. Try to contact people at the community and so on, and they don't know what to do because every time she was at the hospital, they drugged her at the hospital. And then they promised her housing, and then they suddenly don't do anything. And they took her ID when she is a resident, which means that probably war crimes committed with identity theft that are listed on her ID. Now, let's say you got an estate in an area like that. Good luck and goodbye to your estate. Nervous system hacking technologies. There is a lovely article. Um, let me tackle that.
What you doing, puppies?
There was a lovely article. Now, here is the thing. When it comes to protection, even talismans like Deneb Algidi and so on and so forth, as long as an individual is not completely safe, all strategies, nothing is protected, okay? There's no, and that's important. Let's say I sell then a Balgari talisman, or let's say, take a look at that picture, for example. Okay, so let's say somebody makes a screenshot of that picture, some company that promises to prevent them from being targeted wants to charge them money, okay? They can take, I don't need to solicit them taking a picture of this and sending to that business saying, I wish you to have the full consequences for preventing life-saving protection, if indeed that's what you do and you're not a trafficker, so you have the full consequences of preventing protection, the birthright of a person to be safe and sane and free and sovereign with your business. Now, you don't need to ask my permission to use this screenshot if you send it to such business. Why? It's emergency case. The purpose of this talisman is to protect against this type of trafficking, which is intermeshed with weapon trade. Now, let me see. There was an important research that was done on computer interface and living people. And they did that with a dog, and they made a computer make the dog bark 3 times. I'm trying to find the resource for you, because this was a nice channel. They made an AI of Richard Feynman. Now, some of these videos are Richard Feynman, but they made the AI, and some of these videos are absolutely not Richard Feynman. Anyway, that was a lovely thing, and they made this video about water, which is nice to remember, because I did Water Expands Upon Cooling, inspired by Peter R. de Vries, Misdaad voor Slachtoffer, and Richard Feynman's teaching about water. Basically, the water, the properties of water, it expands upon cooling. And Peter's show was Cold Cases, and I tended to the outer planets, which was inspired by assassinated astrologer Nikola Stojanovic. That's on the Spirit of Matter channel, the first and the second season. Then they tried to make me do the peace sign, which is double agent. If I got it right from Trudy Verstegen. So and I tended to what do all the cases, all the individual cold cases that Peter tended to, do they show of a bigger phenomena? Yeah. So now, of course, this opens a lot of topics. And we have, where is this video? Where is this? Where is this? He attended to the Mark Dutroux. I think the moon was besieged yesterday. So there was a lot of besiegement. Now you see all of my timeline. It was yesterday. Oh, that's that lady. Lori Wired. Okay? And the research itself, here, the most unhinged recent computer science discoveries. Okay? She shows her corgi dog. Basically, they use the computer program to hack through the nervous system of a dog and make them bark 3 times, then 5 times. They also make them do the true-like things. They traffic a person, and then a person doesn't like to be trafficked, and so they make them do the true-like things. And this is, by the way, how if Mark Dutroux was trying to appeal. Now again, here's the thing. Scientifically, they can curate him from being sadistic. And it's somewhere, I can even say it's somewhere along him being safe and free and not having his boundaries violated, both within, right now he's in jail, so both within confinement and then later also outside of confinement. Okay? And on the addiction part is meeting the unmet childhood needs, where it could have been a hug as a baby that he didn't receive, or any one of those things. So Maria Antoinetta Bellanova tended to that part. Okay? I set a clear boundary to both Trudy Verstegen and Maria Bellanova. There's no such thing that infants are not choosing to be raped, and people are not choosing to be trafficked. Now, once we understand the mechanism of the torture, then we understand that mechanism, we cannot unboil an egg, but we can untraffic a person. Now, of course, with a person like Mark Dutroux, you will need to be probably, visible or surveilled or something like that. All the civilians are already surveilled, so that would not be a problem. But here is the thing. They probably need him there to smuggle him through some tunnel to rape and kidnap more children. Okay, there are people that say, Sean Edwards says that Mr. Epstein probably is, Jeffrey Epstein is somewhere in Israel and alive and so on. Those things are definitely possible because all they would need is to have a place to smuggle him through the jail, and they can change his identity and so on and so forth. Okay? So they had all the way to make even a Marc Dutroux basically completely safe person. That's the science that they don't want you to know. Now, they prefer, this is why all of his appeal and everything was covered by, which I did a trilogy yesterday. But what they do is they maintain the torture so that he will remain sadistic. I saw a case, okay, I talked about Lars Roman. The guy was ritual abuse survivor. The way I tended to that, he mentioned certain name, and then he was tortured at hospital, and he had no house. So I was like, okay, somehow we need to fundraise for Lars, but we can't. But I have to. If I share his post, I would have to explain the fact that I share that I share him mentioning that name that could get both of us targeted. And I'm like, wait a second. That name they also spoke about against Islam and so on and so forth. But that guy needs housing, and it's a part of his recovery from ritual abuse, which pertains to all of the sectors there. And he also saw that person being ritually abused. And so then they take Lars, they torture him in a hospital. Then it seems like there's recovery. He's using psychedelics to heal himself and so on and so forth. Then it seems like somebody else says, oh, the war on drugs was neutralized. Then he got tortured again. This lady called Isabel. And then he starts running around, calling to target people and so on and so forth. Me and Isabel try to talk between us, and he sees the post. This is not. Then he travels to Poland, or I don't know if he did travel to Poland or not. But here's the thing: there's a person who was satanic ritual abuse survivor. Upon his recovery, of course, he had to say names because Mars' names, and he was sexually raped as a boy, and he had to I don't know if murder a child or rape a child or something like that as a child, but by those rituals. Annika Lucas also addressed that, where they had to do that to children as children. Now, of course, he has to say names. Rape is Mars, and sexual abuse is Mars, and names is Mars, as a part of the recovery. And okay, now of course I try to see what can I do to help Lars, and now I have to say his name. Okay, it is because when he was tortured, then they got him to somehow target me or something like that. And this is basically how they take a person that was ritual abuse survivor. Yeah, he also named another name. It kind of like, I wouldn't say it if it wouldn't show up. I would forget about it. And here is the thing: Mark Rutte is now Secretary General of NATO, and NATO, when it comes to the military strategy, that's a thing that both he deals with and all the people that are supposed to be fighting in NATO dealing with, because it's a military operation that was acting against civilians. Exactly. So, by the way, the laughter comments, also Alondra has that. Uh, Trauma responses sometimes express themselves as laughter at the worst scenes. So for people that are not used to that, um, in any case, this was showing us how they can take a person that was satanic ritual abuse survivor and try to turn him into what he ran away from. But by the same token, they could take a Marc Dutroux and turn him into a completely safe, sane, and free man. Declassify classified technologies. Larry Loudon, 1990s. He does do the 666 symbol. Probably if he wouldn't do that, he would have as much reach as my channel. The minute that I picked Larry Loudon as a theoretical framework for my thesis, everybody knew that I actually do science. But I'm not a paperclip. Now I know from Caitlin, Austin Coppock was homeless before he studied astrology, and that could have been his homelessness and his talismanic inclinations, because he's the electional astrologer for Sphere and Sundry. Those could have coincided. In fact, he was banned as an occultist in Canada. I remember that he talked about that. Um, so, yeah. When I did my Politics of the Senses essay, I basically looked at this declassified CIA documents. Um, me thinking, well, it's declassified. Well, so it's on Google, it's declassified. Where's the problem? And they talked about trauma and the senses, basically that they were doing it by trauma, but it was also the ESP studies. And ESP are senses. Extrasensory perception is simply another frequency, just like, laser frequency versus, the invisible spectrum versus the visible spectrum. For example, when I treat my toenail fungi with laser, soft laser, it has invisible frequency. So the light that I see is actually lead, and it has an invisible laser frequency. It's laser focused. Which reminds me. um, you see what's the beauty about it, because the toenail fungi basically make it. I mean, you never know. Some people have weird kinks. Yeah, I can't see it right now. Anyway, so just like that, the senses or the receptivity to the senses can be enhanced. If we want to reach true cohesion, we do it by embodiment. And Gigi Young teaches, I think she still teaches to do that. And here's the thing with Neptune in Pisces, many people did channeling experiments and so on and learned how to channel and so on. But they wanted to use that at war, and again, only in zero rape, zero slavery. That was the problem with the CIA teaching remote viewing, and that was people began to be afraid of the church. It's nothing to be afraid of the church. The church doesn't own the astral. It doesn't own the senses. That's what the essay was called, politics of the senses. And the second thing is that it can't be used for malefic things. Otherwise, people lose their ability, and by that, they also lose their ability to work. My big discovery is that loss of ability to work uh, is as a result of work that is corrupt. What you're hearing are attempts to basically deflect laser weapons. Yeah, the world is looking like science fiction. Um, that's the meaning of the Epstein list in praxis. That's what they do for a living. And if people thought that the people won't see it, or okay, what do they do when they try to make people not see the crime that is happening? They do lockdowns. Secrecy with the age of air is not something that I would use as strategy. Actually, Dana Belgady is said to help with setting boundaries in complex situations. So, and yeah. Okay, what can I say? That's just life right now.